It would be fair enough to say that Ilva brought the whole ruin down on her own head, since no one in the realm had forced her to stand in a cold passage and beg a stranger to lie for her. It would be fairer to note that she would never have needed a liar at all if the king had troubled himself to read a single page of the rolls he had inherited. And it would be fairest of all to observe that the man in the passage had not been a stranger, and had known exactly what she was asking, and had let her ask it anyway. So the fault was his, entirely his. Dielva was not a woman who begged, and on the whole, not a woman who spoke. She was the keeper of the oath rolls at Alderhelm, which meant she spent her days in a long, cold room beneath the north stair with 400 years of other people's promises. It suited her. Paper did not lie. If a man swore one thing in the 3rd year of a reign, and the opposite in the 5th, the rolls held both, patiently, forever, until somebody like Ilva laid them side by side and made him answer for it. That was the nearest thing to justice she had ever believed in. On the night of the long night feast, the great hall of Alderhelm was hot enough to make the stones sweat. 600 people had come in out of the snow, determined to enjoy themselves before the dark got any longer. Ilva stood behind the salt with the other household servants, holding a cup she had not drunk from, waiting to be given away. She had known for 11 days. Lord Corwin Holloway had bought her oath debt, and a bought debt could be settled in coin or service or marriage, and Lord Corwin had made plain, which he preferred, he would declare it at the feast. It was a kindness, Vesna had said, to do it publicly. Ilva had gone down to the rolls that night and found the entry for her own debt, because she was the sort of person who checked. That was the first thing that went wrong. The debt was written in the ledger of the 9th year in a small brown hand she knew. The sum was there, and the transfer to House Holloway, and the date was wrong, not by a year, by 3 days, in a way no clerk in the realm would have let stand, because it placed the sale of her debt before the death of the man who had held it. A dead man cannot sell. Every scribe in Voskra learns that, in the first week. Someone had moved the date, someone had wanted the sale to be clean, and had not been quite careful enough for a woman who read the rolls the way other people read faces. She had understood 2 things at once. The claim on her was forged, and she could not prove it before the feast, and a declaration made before witnesses stood for a year and a day, whatever any ledger said afterward. Which was how Ilva came to be watching Lord Corwin rise from the high table, and straighten his collar and look, unmistakably, for her. She left the hall. She did not run, because running is noticed. She went along the wall and out through the servants' arch, into the passage to the cold yard, and the noise of the feast shut off behind her, like a door closing under water, and she stood in the dark with her back to the stone, and tried to think. One thing broke a claim, and only one. An older claim, spoken first, held by somebody the court could not ignore. It did not have to be true, it had to be heard. There were 3 men in Alderhelm who might have been persuaded. She had no coin for any of them, and she had perhaps 4 minutes. That was when she saw him. He stood further along where the lamp did not reach, a big man in a hunting cloak with the hood up and snow still going to water on his shoulders, holding a cup he had not touched. An outrider, she thought. One of the king's riders come in late, off the north road, hiding from a court he did not belong to. Ilva crossed to him while the impulse still had hold of her. "I need a favor," she said. "It is a very strange favor, and I have nothing to pay you with, and I am going to ask anyway." The hood turned. She could see the lower half of his face, and the beginning of something that might have been amusement. "Go on," he said. "In 4 minutes a man is going to stand up in that hall and declare a claim on me. It is a bought debt, and the paper is forged. I can prove it in a month, and I have 4 minutes." Her voice was doing something she disliked, so she stopped and started again. Flatter. "A claim only breaks against an older one," spoken aloud, before witnesses. "That is the whole of it. It does not have to be real. You want me to lie to 600 people. I want you to walk into that hall and say you have a claim on me, and let them all hear it." She heard how it sounded. She kept going, because stopping now would be worse. 1 hour. That is all I need. 1 hour and a room full of witnesses, and I will never trouble you again. I swear it, on anything you like. He was very still. And then you take it back in the morning and I bear it, she said. Please. Pretend you love me tonight, only tonight. I will not hold you to a single word of it after. The snow came down through the gap in the roof of the passage and made a small dry sound on his shoulders. "Ilva," he said. She had not told him her name. She was still standing there with that fact going through her like cold water, when he reached up and put the hood back, and the lamplight found him, and he said it, quietly. Not to the hall. Only to her, in the dark, in the way a man says a thing he has already said 100 times to himself. I already do. Then he walked past her out of the passage and into the light and the heat and the noise of the great hall of Alderhelm, and Ilva followed 2 steps behind him because her legs had made the decision without her, and she watched 600 people see him and stop talking, all at once, in a wave that ran the length of the hall like wind over a field. She watched the high table rise, and Lord Corwin Holloway go grey to the lips and drop to one knee with his declaration still unspoken. And Ilva stood in the doorway with the snow melting in her hair and understood, far too late, that she had just begged the Alpha King of Voskra to pretend. She did not sleep. She sat on the edge of her cot in the scribe's row with her boots still on and went through it again and again. And every time she came out at the same place, which was that she had done the single most dangerous thing a person in her position could do, and she had done it on purpose. And there were 600 witnesses. The claim had been made. He had crossed to the high table and turned and said, in a voice pitched to carry to the back of the room, that the woman in the doorway had been spoken for these 11 years, and the matter was closed. He had not needed to raise his voice. The hall had simply believed him, the way a hall believes weather. Then he had looked at her once, across the length of the room, and gone out through the far door. And the noise had come back, like water into a hole. The trouble was not the lie. It was that a king's word once given before witnesses cannot be quietly returned in the morning. She had known that when she asked, and asked anyway, because she had been drowning, and he had been the only rope in the passage. Vesna sent for her at first light. Lady Vesna had kept the household at Alderhelm since before Ilva could remember, and her rooms smelled of beeswax and cold ash and the dry green of the herbs above the door. She was at the window when Ilva came in, and she did not turn around. "Tell me the house has it wrong," Vesna said. "Tell me that you did not corner the king of this realm in a passage and ask to be claimed. I did not know it was him." "That is not better." Vesna turned, and Ilva stopped in the doorway, because she had expected fury, and what was on the older woman's face was not fury, it was fear. Ilva had seen Vesna handle a granary fire, a bad birth, and a lord with a knife out in the buttery, and had never seen this. "What did you put to him?" Vesna asked. "Word for word. I asked him to pretend for 1 hour. I said I would not hold him to it. And what did he say?" Ilva opened her mouth and found she did not want to repeat it. That was strange. She turned it over and could not make sense of the reluctance and set it aside. "He said yes," she said, in a manner of speaking. Vesna sat down slowly, which was worse than if she had scouted. "Child," she said, "do you know what he can do to you? He can send me away. He may do whatever occurs to him, and there is no house in Voskra withstanding to object, and the 2 that might have such standing would find business elsewhere." Vesna pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. "A king does not get made a fool of in his own hall on the long night. If he decides that is what happened, he will need it corrected, and he will need it corrected publicly, and you are the only thing in this to correct." He did not seem angry. He is never angry. That is the difficulty with him. Vesna looked up. He smiles. He has smiled through 4 years on that chair, and every man who leaned on him is either loyal now or gone. And nobody can point to the moment it happened. Do not mistake pleasantness for softness. That man is the strongest wolf in this realm and has never once had to prove it. Ilva felt the last of the night's strange lightness go out of her. Then, what do I do? You say, nothing. You let me go to him. Vesna's voice steadied as she took hold of the problem. I will tell him you were frightened and foolish, and that the fault is mine for not managing the Holloway business better. I will ask him to let it be quiet. He may take the household off me for it. That is a price I can pay. Something turned over in Ilva's chest, warm and painful. Here was the woman who had taken a dead child off a cart in the 9th year and made her into someone, and who was now offering, without hesitating, to stand in front of her. Vesna, she began. And Ilva? Vesna's eyes came up. Whatever he said to you in that passage, whatever he says to you after, you are a clever girl, and you have been sensible your whole life, and I am asking you to be sensible now. Men in high places do not want women out of low ones. Not truly. They want them useful, and they want them grateful. And there is a great deal a person will agree to when she is grateful. I know what I am worth on paper, Ilva said. It came out with more edge than she intended, and Vesna's face did something complicated, and neither of them said anything for a moment, because they both knew which page she meant, and neither of them had ever once said it out loud. Then the gate bell went. Vesna's head came up. It was not the hour bell, and it was not the alarm. It was the long single note that Alderhelm rang for an arrival of consequence, and it was ringing without anyone having told the household to expect one, which meant that whoever was coming had gone straight over the head of the woman who ran this house. There was exactly one person in Vaskra who could do that. Vesna went to the window. Ilva heard her go very still, and then she heard, under the second stroke of the bell, coming up from the yard through the floor and the soles of her own boots, the sound of horses in the snow, and a great many people getting quickly out of the way. He has come himself, Vesna said. The Alpha King of Vaskra came into Lady Vesna's still room with snow on his shoulders and made it feel like a cupboard. Ilva felt it before she had finished turning. The air pulled tight the way it does before thunder, and something under her skin came to attention and stayed there, and she thought, with a kind of despair, that she had talked to this man for 4 minutes in a dark passage without understanding one thing about him. He was tall and heavy through the shoulder, and entirely unhurried, and he carried the stillness of a man for whom rooms had always simply rearranged themselves. In the passage she had taken him for a rider. Standing here in the gray morning light, with his cloak dripping onto the flagstones, he was so plainly the king that she could not think how she had missed it. Ah, said Auric, there she is. Vesna went down. Ilva went down a half-beat later. Your Majesty, Vesna said, you honor this house. Before you say anything further, I must tell you that the girl was frightened out of her wits last night, and spoke without any right to. The fault is mine. I have kept her badly. If there is a correction owing, I would ask that it stop at me, and that it stop quietly. Auric heard her out with his head slightly turned, and Ilva had the odd sense of being present at an assessment rather than a conversation, as though the speech were a page he was holding up to a window. Correction, he said. Lady Vesna, you are not proposing to correct my betrothed in front of me. The silence had a shape to it. Your Majesty, Vesna's voice was very careful. You cannot mean to let this stand. Why would I not? He looked wounded. He looked, Ilva thought, helplessly, like a man enjoying himself enormously. She asked me. I said yes. It is generally held to be binding. She asked you to pretend, did she? Auric turned to Ilva, all courteous attention. Is that what you asked me? Ilva, and here was the difficulty. Because it was exactly what she had asked him, and she could not say so. To say it out loud in front of a witness was to call the king a liar in his own realm on the morning after he had spoken for her in his own hall. It was not merely dangerous. It was the one thing that could not be walked back. He knew that. She could see that he knew it. "I asked your majesty for help," she said carefully. "There. She asked me for help." He spread his hands as though the matter had resolved itself. "I am notoriously helpful," Vesna tried again. "Majesty, forgive me. She is a scribe. She has no name, and no house, and no portion." "She has a portion," Arik said. "It is written down. I imagine she could tell you the folio." The room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with courtesy. Ilva's head came up. It was said lightly, the way he said everything, and it went through her like a splinter of ice. The only people alive who knew her debt was recorded at all were Vesna and the clerk who had entered it. There was no reason on this earth for the king of Vaskra to know the shape of one debt child's paperwork from the 9th year. She looked at him and found he was already looking back, and there was nothing in his face to take hold of at all. She made herself think it through the way she would think through a bad entry. There were 3 ways a man came to know a thing. He had no business knowing. He was told it. He read it. Or he had been there. The first 2 she could account for, given time and a list of names. It was the third that she could not make sit still, because 11 years ago, the king of Vaskra had been a boy of 19, with a dead father and a realm coming apart in his hands. And he had been 300 miles south of the road that Ilva had come up on the back of a cart. She had checked, years ago for no reason she could name now. She had checked where the young king had been in the winter of the 9th year, and the rolls had put him at the southern muster, with 2,000 men. The rolls did not lie. That was the whole of her faith. But somebody had been at her ledger with a blade she had not yet seen, and she did not know that yet, and so for 1 more hour, she went on believing it. 11 years, Vesna said slowly. "Last night you told the hall she had been spoken for these 11 years. So I did, Majesty. 11 years ago, this girl was a child on a cart. I know exactly what she was 11 years ago," Arik said. And for one heartbeat, under the pleasantness, something moved behind his eyes that was not pleasant at all. And Ilva felt the room tip very slightly, and then it was gone, and he was smiling again and reaching for the door. "Now," he said. "Lady Vesna, I am told the ice at the weir took a bad piece out of the north road when it gave way last month. And since I am here and it is my road, and I very nearly went into it, I intend to look at it. Majesty, the keeper of the rolls, has duties in the ledger room. Then she may bring a ledger." He paused at the threshold and looked back at Ilva, and his voice changed, dropping out of the courtly register into the one he had used in the passage, low and unhurried, and meant for exactly one person in the room. "Wear something warm. You will want your hands free." Then he was gone, and Ilva was left holding an apology she had spent the whole night assembling, with no one in the room to hand it to. Vesna did not speak for a long moment. "He knew your folio," she said at last. "Yes. That is not possible." "No," Ilva agreed. "It is not." She got out of the still room, down the 2 flights and under the north stair, and her hands were not steady on the ledger chest, and she told herself it was the cold. The ledger of the 9th year was where she had left it 11 days ago, 3rd shelf, 2nd from the end, with her own ribbon still marking the page. She opened it to the ribbon. The page was gone. Not blotted, not scratched out. Cut, close to the binding, with a blade so fine that she had to tilt the book to the lamp to see the edge of it at all. Somebody had been down here in the night. They rode out to the weir with 4 of his riders strung out behind them, and the sky the color of wet slate, and Ilva said nothing at all for the first 2 miles. She had come up out of the ledger room with the cut page in her head and gone down to the yard because a king had told her to, and now she was on a borrowed horse, beside the most dangerous man in Vaskra, with a hole in the record of her own life. "You are very quiet," Arik observed. "Yes, your majesty. You were not quiet in the passage. In the passage, I did not know who I was speaking to." "Ah," he sounded delighted. "Then let us pretend you still do not, and see what comes out." She looked straight ahead at the road. She thought about the folio. She thought about 11 years, and a cart, and a woman in the granary doorway, saying she supposed the child could be put to some use. And she felt something come loose in her that had been screwed down tight since she was 13 years old. "Very well," she said. "Since your Majesty asks, I did rather. The rolls of this realm have not been properly audited since your father's 9th year. Not once. There are 300 entries I cannot reconcile against any surviving witness, and I have written to the Crown about 11 of them, and had 4 replies, all of them from a clerk, all of them saying the matter has been noted." Her voice was climbing, and she could not get hold of it. Men are being bought and sold on paper that would not survive an afternoon of honest reading. And the reason nobody reads it is that the man at the top of it has never once wanted to know what is written in his own name. The writers behind them had gone very still, in the manner of people working hard at being elsewhere. Arek did not answer for a while. When she risked a look at him, he was watching the road with an expression she could not place at all. 4 replies, he said. Out of 11. Yes. Do you have the dates of the 7? She had expected the cold voice. She had expected to be put off her horse and walked home. She had not expected that, and it knocked the whole shape of her anger sideways. "I have all of them," she said. "By heart. Of course you do." He shook his head slowly. "You are right. Every word of it. I have known the rolls were rotten since the day I sat down in that chair, and I have not been able to get near them. And I have told myself that was caution and not cowardice, and I am no longer certain which it was." He turned in the saddle to look at her properly. "So, show me. You have spent 11 years reading the thing I cannot read. Take me through it as though I were a first-year clerk, and we will discover together how much of my ignorance was convenience." Ilva sat on a borrowed horse in the cold, and discovered she had absolutely nothing prepared for this. "I was going to say a great deal more," she said. "I am sure you may save it." The weir was a wide gray shoulder of frozen water, where the north road crossed above the mill, and the ice had gone out of it in a jagged bite 3 weeks back, and a king's horse had gone down into the black, with a king on it, and only the mercy of a shallow bar had brought both of them up again. Ylva went down the bank without waiting to be helped. She had no business at the weir, but a forged date, a cut page, and a hole in the ice had begun arranging themselves into a shape she disliked, and she wanted to see the edge of the break the way she would see an erasure. The ice at the lip was as thick as her forearm. She went along it on her knees, with her glove off, feeling for the seam, the cold going into her wrist like a nail, and then she stopped. "Your Majesty." He came down the bank. She pointed without touching it. "Ice breaks ragged," she said. "It tears. When it goes under weight, it goes in long splinters, and the splinters point back toward the weight, and you can read them the way you read a torn page." She moved her hand along the edge. "That is not a tear, it is a cut. Somebody came out here with a saw and opened a seam under the snow and let it skin over again overnight. It would have held a man walking. It would not hold a horse." The silence went on long enough that she looked up. Ark was crouched on the ice above her, with his forearms on his knees, and every trace of the pleasant man had gone out of his face, and what was left was very quiet and very old. "You worked that out in 4 minutes," he said. "Anyone would have." "No," he said it flatly. 3 men have stood on this bank since it happened, including the finest tracker in my household, and every one of them told me it was a thaw." Ilva's stomach turned over slowly. "Then they lied to you, or they were told what to see." He stood and put a hand down, and she took it before she had thought about whether she wanted to, and he brought her up onto the bank one-handed as though she weighed nothing at all. "How many entries did you say you could not reconcile?" 306. "And you have them by heart?" "I have most of them by heart. I have all of them written." "Where?" She hesitated. It was the first time in her life anybody had asked her that question, and she found she had been keeping the answer for so long that it had grown a shell. Under the third shelf, she said. There is a gap behind the boards. I have been keeping a second ledger for 6 years. Arik considered her for rather a while, then he laughed. Once, entirely against his own intentions, the way a man laughs when something has got past his guard. 6 years, he said. You have been sitting under my north stair, building a case against my whole court for 6 years, and telling no one. There was no one to tell. There is now. He was still holding her hand. She noticed it at the same moment he did, and neither of them let go for a beat longer than was sensible. And then he did, and the cold came in where his palm had been. As of this moment you are warden of the rolls, not keeper. You may seal any ledger in Vaskra. You may refuse any entry. You judge unsound, and you answer to me and to no one under me, not to the Chancellor, not to my Chamberlain. Majesty. That is not a thing that can simply be said. It is exactly a thing that can simply be said. He was already turning for the horses. I said a great deal harder. In a hall full of people on the long night, and nobody has argued with that either. Ylva stood on the bank of the weir, with the wind off the ice, and her hand still warm, and understood, with a clarity that frightened her, that she had stopped waiting for him to take it back. The ledger room went up 4 nights later. She had stayed late because she always stayed late, and because she had been copying her hidden ledger into a fair hand for a king who had asked to read it, which was such an absurd sentence that she kept stopping to look at it. Bye. The lamp was low. The cold had settled in the corners, the way it did after the 10th bell. Arik had come down unannounced, as he had every night that week, and folded himself onto the clerk's stool with a stack of the 9th year, and read for an hour without saying anything, which she had come to like more than she wished. The first thing she noticed was that the lamp had gone green at the edges. The second was the smell. Get up, she said. I am reading. Get up now. She was already moving. There was smoke coming under the door, in a flat gray sheet, the way smoke does when it has been given somewhere to go, and it was not wood smoke, it was Swedish and thick and wrong, and she knew what it was because she had catalogued the purchase of it 3 winters ago and thought nothing of the entry at the time. Wolfsbane. Somebody has laid Wolfsbane in the stair. Arik was on his feet. He got 2 steps toward the door, and she saw it hit him, saw the strength go out of him, from the shoulders down, like water out of a cracked jar. And he put a hand on the shelf, and missed. She got under his arm. The door is wedged, she said. Do not waste yourself on it. I can break a door. Not that one, and not tonight. He was enormously heavy, and going heavier. Listen to me. This room was a coal store before it was a ledger room. There is a chute in the west wall behind the map press, and it comes out in the kitchen yard, and it is a very unpleasant 9 feet. How do you know that? Because I read the building accounts, she said, in my first month here for pleasure, which tells you a great deal about my first month here. He made a sound that, in a less dire hour, would have been a laugh. The press was iron-bound and stood shoulder-high, and she could not shift it. Arik got an arm behind it, and shoved with what he had left, and the whole thing walked 6 inches across the flags, with a shriek that took the skin off her nerves. Behind it, the hatch was black, with a century of coal dust, and painted shut. She had a bone folder in her belt, used every day of her working life to lift a seal without cracking it. She went at the paint with it flat. It gave. She got her fingers into the gap and hauled, and the coal came up out of the chute like a hand. Go, she said. You first. You are the king. You are the one who can still stand. He was gray. His eyes were losing their focus, and he was still, somehow, arguing. Ylva! Go! She had the 9th year ledger under her arm, and her second ledger inside her coat. And she went, feet first, into the dark. And the drop took the breath out of her, and she came up on hands and knees, on the frozen cobbles of the kitchen yard with her palms skinned open. He came down after her badly, and did not get up. She rolled him onto his side, dragged his collar open, and put her hand flat on his chest, and for 4 seconds there was nothing under it. And then there was, slow and stubborn. The kitchen yard filled with people, and somebody was screaming for water. The North Stair burned for 2 hours, and took 140 years of the Eastern registers with it, and Ylva sat in the snow, with the king of Voskre's head in her lap, until they made her move. He came back to himself in the hour before dawn, in a chair by the great hall fire, pushing off a blanket. "You are not surprised," Ylva said. "I am extremely surprised. I have never been so surprised. You have not asked one question." Her voice was shaking and she let it. "Not who. Not why. A man who is surprised asks who. You have asked me twice whether my hands are burned." Auric looked into the fire. "They tried to drown you," she said slowly. "3 weeks ago at the weir, and tonight they tried to burn you, and the only reason it did not work is that a scribe read the building accounts for pleasure 11 years ago." "How many times, Majesty?" For half a heartbeat, something real came up behind his eyes. Then he said gently, "Your hands are bleeding again," and reached for them. She did not give them to him. She sat back in her chair in the gray light with her palms stinging, and looked at him, and thought, "I do not know what you are. A man who cannot see the knife at his own throat, or a man who has known about it all along and has some reason for letting it stay there." She did not know which, but she had begun, without deciding to keep a list. The list grew all through the dead middle of that winter, and none of it helped. She was very good at this. That was the maddening part. She had built a case against 306 entries and half the chancellery. Against Auric, she could build nothing, because he answered every question she put, and none of the answers went anywhere. She would ask who profited by his death, and he would offer to list them alphabetically. She would ask why he had arrested nobody, and he would say that taking the wrong man was only a way of telling the right one to hurry. She would press hard on the 11 years and the folio, and he would consider her with enormous patience, and observe that suspicion suited her, and that he hoped she would go on being suspicious of him for many years. He handed her nothing she could file, and a great deal she had no drawer for, because the worst trouble was this. She had begun watching him for danger, and she had gone on watching him. It crept up the way a thaw does. The first morning, he came down to the new ledger room in the old chapel, with his sleeves already turned back, and the light off the snow coming through the high window and down the line of his throat. She mislaid the end of her own sentence entirely, and had to ask him to repeat a figure he had not yet given her. "You stopped," he said. "I am thinking." She was not thinking about anything of the kind. She caught herself at it, was appalled, and spent the next hour being so short with him that a passing clerk fled. He bore all of it with the placid good humor of a man keeping score and enjoying the total. It got worse. He took to bringing her food, because she forgot to eat, and he did it without comment, which was far harder to withstand than if he had made anything of it. He read her second ledger end to end over 9 nights, argued with her about 4 pages, and conceded 3. He asked her opinion in front of his chancellor, and then took it, and the chancellor's face did something Ylva revisited with satisfaction for a week. And once on the wall above the kitchen yard, at the cold end of a night, when neither of them could sleep, he put a cup of something hot into her hands, and where his fingers crossed hers the feeling went up her arm like a struck bell. She very nearly dropped it into the yard. She managed not to by scowling ferociously at the horizon. "You have stopped pretending to look at the sky," he said. "They are stars. They are being rather outdone tonight." He was watching her without any pretense of doing otherwise, and in no hurry at all about it. And Ylva, who had stood her ground against 2 chancellors and a bishop over a disputed folio, found she could not meet that for the length of one breath. That was what she could not manage. He never pressed. He simply waited, and let her feel it, and said nothing. It broke on a night in the 2nd month, in the chapel, over nothing at all. He had come in, and sat down across from her, with no papers, no question, and nothing she could enter against the visit in any honest ledger, and after a while, she put her pen down and heard herself say, "What do you want from me?" "No, I have run out." Her hands would not hold still and she let them shake. "You come down here every night, and you will not name it, and you will not go, and I cannot keep standing in the middle of it. Tell me, it is the ledgers. Tell me you need a witness. This court will swallow, and I am the only one to hand. Give me a reason with a use in it, because I was raised to be useful, and I know how to survive that, and I have no idea at all how to survive this seh." She stopped far too late. "Want what?" Arik said. "Not teasing, not anything. You know what?" He stood and came around the table slowly, the way you approach a thing that may bolt. "If it is only that I want you, men like you do not want women like me." It came out as almost nothing. "We are line items. That is what we are for." "I have read the page." Something went across his face that she did not understand at all. "Then tell me to stop," he said, "and I will go out of this room tonight and never trouble you again." He was near enough now that she had to lift her chin to keep his eyes. His voice dropped. "Or, tell me to prove it." Somewhere behind her a candle guttered. She could hear her own blood. "Prove it," she said. He kissed her, and 11 years of careful order went out of Ilva's head like a lamp in a draught. One hand came up behind her head into her hair. There was no hall and no witness, and nothing here that anybody would ever write down. Her legs stopped attending to their duties, and she put out a hand and found the edge of the table and held on to it. And then she caught the scent of him properly, and that undid her, because there was no management in it at all. It was not clever, and it was not aimed at a room. It was aimed at her, and it was frightened, and it had been going on for weeks. She had been prized for her memory and her hand for as long as she could remember. Nobody had ever simply wanted her, and she had no procedure for it. She took a handful of his collar and pulled him down and kissed him back, the way she had been rehearsing without permission for a month, and he made a sound she thought about for a long while afterward, because it was not the sound of a man who had planned anything. They talked until the fire went down to embers, which was not what either of them had expected of the evening. She told him about the second ledger and the hollow behind the third shelf. He told her about a chair he had been put into at 19 and had never once felt the right size for. Neither of them mentioned Vesna, or the moot, or the ice at the weir. Somewhere before dawn, she fell asleep in the chair, with her boots still on and her head against his shoulder, and he did not move for 2 hours in case it woke her. This was not a use, this was not a scheme. And that, she thought, when she woke and understood where she was, is the most dangerous thing that has ever happened to me. The northern houses came in at the turn of the year for the moot, and Alderhelm filled up with men who had not been made to answer for anything in a very long time. Dilva was presented on the second evening as Warden of the Rolls, an office that had not existed a month earlier. She stood in the great hall in a grey gown Yarrow had bullied her into and heard Arik tell 400 people that every ledger in Voskra was sealed under her hand, and that any man with an objection was welcome to bring it to her directly, and that he would be extremely interested to watch. Nobody did. Afterward, he found her at the edge of the hall and tucked her hand through his arm and walked her the entire length of the room, slowly, past every house in the north. "You are enjoying this," she said. "I am enjoying it enormously. Let them look. They are looking at a scribe in a borrowed gown. They are looking at the only person here who frightens them," Arik said, "and it is doing them enormous good." He took her out through the arch, onto the gallery, where the music went thin behind them and the cold came up off the snow in the yard. And for a while neither of them said anything. "You hate this," Ilva said. He did not look at her. "Hate is strong. You are lying." She had spent 2 months learning the shape of him. She knew now what he sounded like when he was enjoying himself, and what he sounded like when he was working. You have not stopped smiling for 3 hours, and you have not met one of them since the fish. Arik laughed, once surprised out of him. No, he agreed. Not since the fish. He leaned on the rail, and the courtly ease went out of him all at once, and what was left underneath looked tired in a manner the hour did not account for. I have been at this since the year I turned 19, he said, smiling. Being what the room requires. My father died in the autumn, and by the spring, there were 4 houses in the north measuring the chair, and I was a boy who had never held anything. And I worked out very quickly that if I was charming enough, nobody would trouble to find out what I was not. He turned the cup in his hands, and I have never been able to decide whether that made me clever or simply a coward with good manners. Auric, pay no attention. Too much of the wine, and not enough of the fish. He gave her the smile. It was a good one. She had watched him hand that smile to dukes and frightened clerks for 2 months, and she had never once had it turned on her, and she found she could not bear it. She reached up and put her hand along his jaw. His breath caught. The smile came apart. I have read 400 years of men explaining themselves, Ylva said. You are not the worst of them. You are not even close. That is not comfort. It was not meant to be. She held his eyes. You are not the performance, and the man underneath it. I like him a very great deal. Something cracked open behind his face. Then he took her hand off his jaw and held it, and said, Come here, and drew her back from the rail into the dark of the arch, and put her hand flat against the stone of the old hearth wall, where the kings of Vaskra had been swearing things since before the rolls began. And he said the old words, not the court oath, not the form a man uses at a marriage or a muster. The old speech, the 6 lines that no king had spoken in 4 generations, because no king had been willing to, the binding that cannot be undone by council or crown or death. The one that costs the speaker everything, if it is spoken false. Ylva stood quite still and let it go through her. 600 people in that hall would have heard beautiful nonsense. Ylva had catalogued every use of those 6 lines in 4 centuries. There were 11. 4 of those men had died inside a year of breaking them. She knew what the words weighed the way a jeweler knows a stone. In the hand, without asking, he had just laid his life on a shelf in front of her, and stepped back from it. Auric, she whispered. I know what you were going to say. His voice was not steady. You were going to tell me it was too much. You cannot take that back. No, he agreed. That is rather the point of it. She kissed him against the hearth wall in the dark with the music going on somewhere behind them, and for the first time in 11 years, Ylva let herself simply have a thing without checking the paperwork. It lasted until the bells went for midnight. She had gone back in for her cloak when she saw him cross the far end of the gallery, alone, moving fast in the way he never moved in company, and go down the servants' stair toward the old still room. Ylva stood with her cloak over her arm. Then she followed him. The still room door was ajar and there was a lamp inside it, and Ylva pushed the door open with 2 fingers. Auric was behind Vesna's writing desk. The drawers were out. He had a page in his hand with a raw edge down one side, where it had been cut close to a binding with a very fine blade. Neither of them moved. That is my page, Ylva said. He set it down slowly. Yes. You have had it since the night it was taken. Since 2 hours after it was taken. His voice had gone very calm and very level, and she recognized the voice at once. It was the one he used on chancellors and frightened councilmen. He had not used it on her in 2 months. He was using it now. Ylva! Sit down! I will not sit down. Her ears were ringing. You stood on the gallery an hour ago and spoke the 6 lines to me. And then you came down these stairs before the bells had finished and emptied my guardian's drawers onto her blotter. So tell me what this is. I have been investigating Vesna, Auric said, for 4 years. The words did not resolve into anything. They were only sounds. Vesna, she said, the Eastern registers, the debt children. 11 letters you wrote to a crown that never answered, because every one of them crossed her desk. He put both hands flat on the wood. 20 years of selling people on forged paper and moving the coin into House Holloway. I believe the men who sawed the ice at the weir were paid out of the same purse. And I could prove none of it, because the proof sat in a ledger room she controlled. No, Ilva, no. She had her back against the doorframe. She took me off a cart, she fed me. She taught me my letters. She taught me the hands. She taught me everything I have. She is the one thing in my whole life that was never once a lie. I know, he said. That is what makes it work. And then the last of it came up at her altogether, the way the foot of a page arrives when you have been reading too fast, and the ground was simply not there anymore. You needed somebody inside the rolls, she said. Somebody she trusted, somebody the court would believe. Yes, that is why you were in the passage. He did not answer. You were waiting. Her voice was going somewhere, she could not follow it. You knew Holloway would declare. You knew I would run. You stood in the one passage between the hall and the yard, in a hood, holding a cup you never drank from, and you let me beg. Yes, Arik said. Say I am wrong. I cannot say you are wrong. She pressed her hands over her face. She had begged. She had stood in the dark and offered a stranger anything, and had thought afterward, in the small hours in the warm, that of all the accidents in her life, this had been the one kind one. The whole of it, she whispered. Every hour of it was an errand, not all of it. You knew my folio. She dropped her hands. On the first morning, I have turned that over every night since, and never once made it fit, and now it fits. You had read me before you ever saw me, the way I read an entry, and you knew exactly which string to pull. That is not why I knew it. Then why? He was silent a while. Whatever the answer was, it surfaced somewhere behind his eyes, and he let it go under again. I cannot tell you that tonight. Of course you cannot. Ilva, listen. He started around the desk, saw her retreat, and halted where he stood. I would have told you. I have been trying to find the hour to tell you for 6 weeks, and every hour I found was one where I would have had to watch you look at me exactly like this. Then you should have chosen one of them, she said. Before you let me fall in love with you. He flinched. She was glad. Then take her, she demanded. You are the king. Put her in a cell and read her papers at your leisure. Because being king does not make me untouchable. He said it wearily. She has held this house for 20 years, and half the northern moot has taken her coin without knowing whose it was. Arrest her on a suspicion and there are 4 houses waiting for exactly that discourtesy, and blood on the snow before the thaw. He shook his head, and the evenness went out of him at last. A frightened king reaches for the nearest throat, and the realm remembers it, and 3 winters later, the realm settles the account. I could not move on her until I had a thing that no man in that hall would be able to stand up and dispute. She could find no fault in it anywhere. That was the unbearable part. Every piece of it was sound, and she wanted very badly for it not to be. You are wrong about her, she said. Then read it. He held the page out. It is your own hand on the reverse, from 6 years ago. Flagging an entry you did not understand at the time. Read your own note. Ilva. She did not look at it. Not everybody manages people the way you do, she said. Some of us are exactly the size we appear. Arik was quiet for a moment, and then, gently, in a voice she would have given a great deal not to hear, he said, Who told you that you were a line item? She stopped. You said it to me in the chapel, he went on. You have said it 3 times since I have known you. That you know what you are for. That you know what you are worth on paper. He did not move closer. Nobody arrives at 13 believing that of themselves. Somebody sits with them, patiently, for years, and teaches it. Who taught you? And Ilva stood in her guardian's still room and heard it, quite clearly, in that dry, kind voice, across 100 winter evenings. You are a sensible girl, and there is a great deal a person will agree to when she is grateful. Men in high places do not want women out of low ones. They want them useful, and they want them grateful. For 11 years, she had been repeating a woman's opinions back at the world in her own voice, and had never once thought to ask whose they had been to begin with. You should have said, she got out, and her voice broke apart halfway. You knew from the start that I was not in it. You watched me put you down a coal chute with my hands opening on the stone, and in all that time not one honest sentence. Why was I not worth one Arik? He looked at her, and the answer when it came was barely a breath. Because I did not think you would believe me over her, and I was right, was I not? It landed like a slap, because it was not wrong. So, she went past it to the older thing underneath, the one that had been sitting quietly in her since she was 13, waiting for a night like this. You let me stand in a passage and beg, Ilva said. You could have said one word. You said I already do, and you let me think it was a kindness. It was true. It was useful. She turned for the door. Good night, Your Majesty. Ilva, please. There is a woman in this house who has tried twice to kill me, and there is a moot of 400 men downstairs, and I need you. And there it was. Not, I am sorry. Not, I cannot lose you. I need you. She got the door open and went out, and the cold of the passage took her, and she did not turn round. Vesna was waiting at the turn of the stair. She stood in her grey wool with her hands folded, as though she had been there some while, and Ilva went to her without deciding to. Child, Vesna said, you are white as ash! And it was too large to hold on to, so she put it down in front of the nearest person, the way she always had, that it had been a use, that he had been waiting in the passage, that none of it had ever been for her. I know, she said. I would have kept it from you if I could. She put her arm around Ilva's shoulders and walked her down to the still room where the lamp was still burning and the drawers were still out, and she looked at the open desk for exactly 1 moment too long before she made her face do sorrow. Sit, Vesna said. There is worse, and you had better hear it from me. She took a page out of her sleeve. He was in my papers looking for this. Vesna said. He did not find it. I have carried it since the night the North Stair burned, and I did not want you ever to see it. She laid it on the desk. It was the page. The true page cut from the 9th year, with the entry for one debt child in the small brown hand, and the sum and the transfer, and at the foot of it, in red wax, pressed clean and deep, the great seal of the reign of Arik. He bought you, Vesna said gently, 11 years ago. He was 19, and he came north with the muster, and he bought a child off a cart the way a man buys a hound, and he put you in my house to be raised useful, and he has been waiting all this while to come and collect. That is your 11 years, Ilva. That is what he meant in the hall. Ilva studied the page. Then she began very quietly to cry, and Vesna held her, and over the older woman's shoulder Ilva looked at the red wax and thought, with the cold, clean part of her mind that had never once stopped working, that the seal was wrong, because the great seal of Arik's reign had been cut in the 10th year, not the 9th. His father's matrix had gone into the fire with his father, as they always did, and the new one had taken the cutter 11 weeks, and Ilva knew this because she had catalogued the payment for it. There was no great seal in the 9th year. There could not be. The page was a forgery, and a very good one, made by somebody who knew the rolls extremely well and had got one small thing wrong, and there was exactly one person in Voskra who fitted that description, and she was stroking Ilva's hair. Everything Auric had said in the still room stood up quietly and put itself in order. Ilva did not go near the page. She let herself be held and kept her breathing ragged, and thought about 400 northern men in the hall below, and one woman who could not be arrested without proof. What happens now? She asked. Vesna's grip changed very slightly. We take it to the moot, she said. Tonight, while every house is under one roof, a king who buys children is no king at all. He will be set aside, and the North will hold, because there are names ready and willing to steady it. Her voice went soft and reasonable. But it cannot be me who says it. I keep a house. They will hear a servant grasping at a crown. It must be said by somebody that room already trusts. The warden of the rolls, Ilva said. You are the only person in Vaskra who can certify a page, said Vesna, and every man in that hall knows it. They went down together. Ilva had never walked so far. No plan, no ally, no way to send word ahead. A forged page in her guardian's hand, and one fact about a piece of steel. The hall was full. Arik stood at the head of the long table with his back to the door. He turned when they came in, and for half a breath his whole face opened. Then he saw who she had walked in with, and it went out like a lamp. My lords, Vesna said, I am sorry to bring this, but it is not a small thing and it will not keep. She laid it out. The child, the cart, the sum, the seal. She wept at exactly the right moment, and 400 men believed all of it. That is a lie, Arik said. Every line of it. He would, said Vesna. But the crown's own warden of the rolls is standing at my elbow, and she is the woman named in the page, and she has every reason on this earth to protect the man she was to marry. She held out a hand. Tell their lordships what you see. 400 faces turned. Ilva looked at Auric, who thought she had come to bury him. Forgive me, she said to him with no sound at all. You told me the truth and I put it down and walked away from it. Then she walked forward and picked up the page and held it to the light. I certify this page a forgery, she said. 400 people stopped breathing at once. The hand is a fair copy of the 9th-year clerk. The ink is right. The rag of the paper is right. Her voice came out flat and carrying, the one she used on a disputed folio, and it did not shake. The seal is impossible. This is the great seal of the reign of Auric, and the great seal of the reign of Auric was cut in the 10th year, 11 weeks, after his father's matrix went into the pyre. I have the payment for the cutting in the household book, 16 marks to a man in the smith's row, and I carried that book out of the fire in the north stair under my own coat, and it is on the 3rd shelf of the chapel at this moment. She turned to the moot. Send 2 men of your own choosing, not mine, not his. Bring the book and read it yourselves. This is hysteria, Vesna said. Then the book costs you nothing, said the oldest of the northern lords. He nodded to his own people, and Vesna's face changed. The kind grey woman went out of it like a light down a corridor, and what remained was cornered and perfectly clear-eyed, and she moved for the door. Ilva got there first and put her back against it. You taught me to read, she said. Vesna stopped. You sat with me every evening for 11 years, Ilva went on, and taught me every hand in this realm, and how ink ages, and how rag paper takes a crease. And you taught me I was worth a sum on a page, so that I would never think to check the sum. Her eyes were streaming and her voice did not waver. You should have thought harder about what you taught me to read. Then the northern men had her by the arms. The hall took an hour to empty. When the last of them had gone, there was nobody left in it but the 2 of them, and a fire that had stopped being tended. Auric had not moved. You saved my crown, he said. I stopped a forgery, said Ilva. That is my office. Something went out behind his eyes, Ilva. He came a step closer and stopped when she did not. The 6 lines, on the gallery. You know what those words cost. You, of all people, know. I could not have said them if it were not. I know exactly what they cost, she said. That is not the difficulty. Then what is? You stood in a passage on the coldest night of the year, and let me beg you for something you had already decided to give me. Her chin came up. You watched me offer to pay for it, and then you let me go on believing for 2 months that I had been lucky. Ilva, I love you. I believe you, she said, and watched that land, and watched the hope come up in his face, and hated what she had to do next. I have spent my whole life being useful to people who were fond of me. You are only the best of them. Tell me what to do. Nothing. She was already at the door. I am glad you are alive. You will be a good king. but I cannot trust you. And I have no idea whether that is a thing that comes back. She saw him understand that he had broken a thing that would not go back together. Ilva, please. I will do anything. I will. She walked out. She was warden of the rolls for 6 months, and she was extraordinarily good at it. The audit went through Vaskra that spring like fire through gorse. Vesna sat in the old fort under the hill, and the rot she had worked into the eastern registers came out in strips. 11 houses paid back what they had taken. All 306 entries fell, and 406 debt bonds with them, and every one of those people was told so in writing by the warden herself, because Ilva had decided they would hear it from a person and not a clerk. Every piece of that was the king's doing, and the city noticed and grew fond of him over the course of one spring. He also spent 5 of those 6 months trying to get her back. He did not send flowers. He would not have known where to begin, and she would have sent them to the infirmary, and he probably knew that too. He sent pages. The eastern registers had burned, but not all of them, and Arik had put 9 men on the recovery. Every week a boy came up to the chapel with a flat parcel of oiled cloth, and inside was one restored leaf, scorched at the edge, pressed, and mended and readable. Folded in with each leaf was a note he had written himself. A few were 3 lines, a few filled both sides. Several had nothing to do with her at all, and were instead about a pension dispute in the south, or an appointment he suspected he was about to make badly, put to her plainly, as though her plain answer were still a thing he wanted. One said, I have now found 40 ways to write an apology, and every one of them is too small for the thing it is meant to cover. I am sending them anyway, on the principle that quantity is the only argument I have left. Another said, You told me once that paper does not lie. I have not been able to put that down since. I was holding 11 years of the truth about you, and I kept it because I was frightened of what you would do with it. And a man who decides for another person what they are able to bear has not protected them. He has simply preferred them quiet. And 1/3 of the way down a page, she had sworn to herself she would put aside unfinished, said, I am not asking for you back because I need you. I have never once needed you. That is the entire difficulty, and I do not know how to make it sound like more than it is. She kept them all. She would have died before she admitted it. Yarrow and Doran had opinions from the first week. Good, Yarrow said in the first weeks, banging the kettle down. Let him sit in it. You owe that man nothing. By the 3rd month, the line had moved. He struck out the bonds. Doran said one evening, not looking up, all of them. My mother's among them. She is 61, and she cried. He has written you what, 40 letters? 43, said Yarrow, who had evidently been keeping a tally. By the 5th month, they had abandoned subtlety entirely. Warden, Yarrow said, I say this with love. Go and speak to him. There is nothing left to say to him. You are wretched. He is wretched. And the rest of us are obliged to stand in the middle of the 2 of you, all day, pretending we cannot see it. Ilva laid her pen across the inkwell. I was made use of, she said. I am not going back for a second helping of it. I am good at this office. The rolls are honest for the first time in 40 years, and what I would like is to be permitted to get on with it. Then, in the 6th month, one came that did not read like the others. Ilva, you have been clear with me, and you were owed the right to be. What I have been doing is asking you to carry my forgiveness for me on top of everything else you are already carrying, and that is one more errand handed to you by a man who wanted something. I am ashamed of it. There will be no more of these. She read it through, and then again it was precisely what she had asked for. She could not account for why it went down like a stone and stayed there. He was as good as his word. Nothing came, the following week, or the week after. When they met in the corridor, he inclined his head and said, Warden, and the tone of it was perfectly courteous and not cold, in the least, and that was somehow the whole trouble. He had simply stopped. You wanted this, she informed herself, and went on working, and worked well, And every night the thing she had shut behind her ribs on the gallery 6 months ago sat exactly where she had left it and declined to weaken by so much as a thread. The last parcel of oiled cloth stayed unopened on the corner of her desk for 11 days. She had not been able to make herself open it, and she had not been able to make herself put it away, and it lay there like a hand held out. On the 12th night, Doran came into the chapel with Yarrow half a step behind him, and both of them had gone the color of people who have just discovered the size of something. "What?" Ylva said slowly. "Have you done?" "He is not in the house," said Yarrow. "The king. We have had the chambers, the hall, the stables. He is nowhere in it." "Since when?" "No one has seen him since the 9th bell." Ylva discovered that she was already standing. "Say it properly," she said. "All of it. Who saw him last?" "The chancellor after the council." Duran was white. "Warden. His cloak is on the stand. His horse is in the stall. Nothing is gone. His scent lifted from the chamber and carried to every gate, and do it quietly. Nothing rung. If this house takes fright, we will have 400 people in the yard by dawn, all of them standing exactly where we need to walk." They went. She stood in the middle of the chapel, with her hands flat on the table. There was one way to find him, and she had known it from the moment Yarrow said gone. She had shut it on the night of the moot, and kept it shut for 6 months. The way you keep a door on a room you cannot afford to heat, and all that time it had sat there warm, and patient, and entirely undiminished. "This is the office," she told herself. "He is the king and I am the warden, and locating him is a duty." That was not all it was. She opened it. It came through like a door blown in. Sorrow first, level and horribly familiar, the exact twin of what she had been carrying since winter. Then, a tiredness that frightened her. Underneath it, a stubborn, miserable steadiness. He was not hurt, and he was not afraid. He was sitting somewhere in the dark being unhappy, and had been doing it quietly. She understood, with a lurch, for a very long time, in a house full of people who thought him charming. She knew where he was. Before she had finished the thought, the north stair had been shut since the fire. The door at the bottom was warped, the smell of burnt oak had never gone out of it, and the old ledger room stood open to the sky where the roof had come down. Auric sat on the floor, with his back to the shelves that had not burned, in his shirt sleeves in the cold, beside the black square of the coal hatch. He raised his head as she came through the door, and did not appear to find her arrival remarkable in any way. "You opened it," he said. "Half the household is out in the snow looking for you." Her voice came out furious, because the alternative was worse. "No word? No guard? No, the trackers are up. Doran has been sick with it. I only meant to sit down for an hour. It is the 4th hour. Ah," he considered this. "Then I have been rather rude." Ylva stayed in the doorway with the cold coming down through the broken roof, and could not work out whether she wanted to shake him or lie down beside him. "Why here?" she said. "Because this is where you pulled me out." He said it plainly. "I sit here when it gets bad. I have done for months. It is the one place in this house where I am certain of something." "And what is that?" "That you did not have to." He looked at the hatch. "Both ledgers under your coat, a 9-foot drop. A clear yard. Nobody would ever have known. You came back for a man who had lied to you, before you knew he had, and you have never once mentioned it to a soul." She sat down on the burnt floor a yard away from him, because her knees had gone ahead without consulting her. "I stopped writing," he said. "I know. I meant it. I am not going to ask you again." He turned the words over carefully, like a man handling something hot. "I did not lie to you to protect the realm. I lied because I was afraid that if you knew all of it you would look at me and see one more person who had decided what you were for. So I decided what you were strong enough to know, which is the same thing, only cowardly." She looked at the black square of the coal hatch, and at the man sitting beside it, in the cold, and asked the question she had been carrying since the first grey morning in Vesna's still room. "Auric," she said, "what did you mean?" 11 years. He was quiet for a long moment. "I was 19, he said. My father, 4 months dead, and I was riding to the northern muster with 2,000 men, and I went ahead for 6 days with 4 riders because I wanted to see the road before it saw me. That week is not in the rolls. I have looked. It was taken out. 306 entries, Ilva said faintly. There was a cart on the Weir Road with a woman from Alderhelm on it, and 3 children in the back, and one of them, a bony thing of 11 or 12, stood up on the boards and told a stranger with a sword that the paper was wrong, because the man whose name was on it had been dead a fortnight, and a dead man cannot sign. Dielva could not breathe. You were furious, Arik said. And I was 19 and had just been handed a realm I did not understand, and I remember thinking quite clearly that if there were people in it like that, then perhaps it could be run. You put me in her house. I asked that you be placed and lettered and kept, and I paid for it and I wrote it in a book, and I never once went back to look at what I had put you into. His jaw was tight. That is the folio, Ilva, not a purchase, an expense. I know exactly how that sounds, and it is the truest thing I have. I did not buy a child. I paid a housekeeper to teach one to read, and then I forgot about it for 11 years. And she used those 11 years to teach you that you had been bought. Something very old gave way in her. There was a page, she said, the real one. Not the seal forgery. She let me find it myself, when I was 13. She left the ledger open on the table and went out of the room, and I have believed it every day since. Yes, it said a sum. It said 11 marks, Arik said. And it is not a sale. Then what is it? He reached inside his coat and took out a flat packet of oiled cloth, and she recognized it, because its twin had been sitting on the corner of her desk for 11 days. I sent you this on the 4th of the month, he said. You never said, so I made a second. He put it into her hands. Inside was one restored leaf from the Eastern registers of the 9th year. Not the ledger, the register, the one that recorded, not debts but deaths. And in it, in the small, brown hand, was her mother's name, and a date, and a fever, and 11 marks paid out of the parish for the burial of a woman with no house to bury her. 11 marks, not a price. There had never been a sale. There had been a dead woman, a burial cost, a child with no one to claim her, and a housekeeper with a talent for hands and ink, who had looked at an orphan who could already read and seen what could be made of a girl who believed she owed something. Ilva put both hands over her mouth. 11 years, she said, from somewhere far off. Every single thing I've ever thought about myself. I know. When I told you I was a line item, on the gallery in the chapel, her whole body was shaking. You knew. You had this. 8 days, Arik said. It came out of the recovery in the 4th month, and I sat with it for a week trying to find a way to hand it to you that was not one more powerful man arriving with a document to tell you who you are. His voice went down the middle. So I sent it and said nothing, and I have not slept properly since, and I did not know whether you had opened it. Ilva looked at the burnt shelves and the broken roof, and 11 years going quietly to pieces. I could not open it, she whispered. I thought it would be another letter. It was a letter, he said. It was the only thing I had left to say. She cried then, with both hands over her face, and he did not reach for her once. And it was the not reaching that finished her, because he had learned it. When she could speak, she said, I do not know how to be a person. No, Arik agreed. I do not imagine you do. I have been that for 11 years. Yes, and I do not know how to believe you either. She lifted her head. Her face was ruined, and she did not care. That was always the thing. I never once thought you were lying. I could not make it fit, because I knew what I was worth. And it was 11 marks. And no arithmetic on earth gets you from 11 marks to a king on a gallery speaking the 6 lines. She laughed, and it came out wrecked. I have spent my whole life checking sums. That one would not come out, so I made it a use instead, because a use is a figure, and figures I can read. Arik closed his eyes. Ilva, he said. I know. 6 months, he said it to the floor. You have been carrying that for 6 months, and I thought you simply did not want me. I know. He put a hand over his eyes and took it away again, and what was underneath was completely undefended, and he said the thing he had promised himself he would not. Then pretend for me, he said, just tonight. That is all I am asking, and I will never ask again, and in the morning you may take it back, and I will bear it. His voice had gone to nothing. Pretend, only tonight, that you believe me. And there it was, the whole of it, handed back to her across 11 years and a burnt floor in a cold room in a house that had lied to them both. Ilva looked at him. At the tiredness, and the hands, and the man sitting on the floor of the room she had hauled him out of, who had not touched her once. I already do, she said. He did not ask her to marry him that night, which she thought was probably the most sensible thing he had ever done. He asked her 4 months later, and then he went on asking because the first 11 times she told him to come back and try tomorrow, and it became, somewhere in the spring, a sort of institution. He asked across the council table so often that the chancellor submitted a written complaint. He asked out on the ramparts at midnight, with 2 cups cooling in his hands. He asked in the middle of a grazing dispute in front of Southern men who never recovered the thread of their argument. He asked clumsily, and he asked well, and on one occasion, with so many candles lit, that Yarrow put half of them out herself, observing that the warden would take it poorly if he burned the rolls down a second time. And every day Ilva sent him away to come back tomorrow, until one entirely unremarkable morning in the autumn, she looked up from a grazing petition at the man beaming at her over the top of it, and said yes. Alderhelm emptied into the streets for the wedding. He wept during the vows. She had been fairly sure he would. She did not quite, although it was closer than she would ever admit, and the thing behind her ribs informed on her regardless, and he laughed at her, with his own face wet, and she found she did not mind who was watching. Well, he said when it was over, that is the end of taking it back. I have no intention of it, said Ilva. I asked you first, in a cold passage, on the longest night of the year. Your answer wanted work. I said yes, extremely well. You said 3 words, and walked off. They were, said Arik, the best 3 words I have ever put in a row. She could not think of an answer to that, so she kissed him instead, and for once in her life she did not check the paperwork